of time to just recover.
Next week, we have to also discuss Jimmy Golding because he's down to talk to us next week as well. All right.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So let's go.
Yeah, Michael, we're gonna do, because we got so much fucking happening at the moment. We're gonna do like big MotoGP wrap ups.
We do.
And
especially
considering you're not, a weekly attendee. We figured we could spread it out a little bit more for you.
That was the contract I signed. I made it quite clear at the start of this venture that I would not be able to make every pod, so I do my best.
So we've adjusted for that.
This will be the funny part. If in like 5 years' time this pod starts making money, will Michael then jump on and be there every week to cash in?
Pay as you play, boys. Pay as you play. It's like the Michael Owen Man United contracts.
I like that. It was a successful contract for Big Mickey. Yeah. Well,
why don't we crack into Supercars or F1?
No, we're going to start with F1.
So,
boys, episode 27 of the pod.
Welcome.
Thanks for having you all on. 27, 8. We've done half a year of the pod. More than half a year because we haven't podded every week. So there's a little bit
we're doing double ups at one stage.
Yeah, it's true. We've got a bit of traction, so that's good news. But we'll start with the Formula One. So race 2 of the season. It's crazy that the season has, we were anticipating it for so long, and then all of a sudden it's not just one race. We've had 2 races over 2 weekends, and really what a start to the season we've had. So we won't really, if you haven't watched the race, I suggest jump onto your KO or to your Fox Sports and watch a KO or Fox Mini. Get the race in. Again, not the opportune time to start a race meet for us people in Australia. But what always makes what I was thinking about today, all those poor Italians that wait for this, or the Europeans that wait for the season to start, and then they have to watch it at this, crappy hour when we start our seasons in Australia.
Dude, they get like 16 good time races.
I know, I get it, but we're spoiled in the sense that we're spoiled in the sense that we get to anticipate the season, and then we get to watch it in our time and make a day of it and stuff like that. So
that's bullshit. They can travel to every single race, and they're like 2 hours away from everything. Shut up. They can do one.
No, but I'm saying for us, it's I don't think I appreciated enough that the first race was in Australia and we didn't have to, you could watch it without any issues and stuff like that. Whereas the last 2 races, it's like, no, got to go to work.
I got up at 4 a.m. this morning. It wasn't too bad.
Yeah, I'm not going to do that. 4 o'clock. No. Anyway, so first race of the second race of the season, Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, another interesting track. But unlike last year, I think this week's racing, or last night's racing, put on a spectacle with the new cars. I have to say that. So just a recap for those who might not have watched it. The race was won by Max Verstappen after a really good late race battle with Charles Leclerc, who finished in second. Third went to Carlos Sainz, fourth to Perez, fifth to George Russell. And then after that, there was a smattering of all the mid-table teams, which was really good to see as well. So boys, where do we start? Let's just jump straight into the talking points.
Let's just talk about Max and Carlos. Carlos, Max and Charles, I think. Where else
do you want to begin? All right, let's go.
Did
you get a haircut, did you?
Yeah, why?
Looks all right. Skin fade and tough top. I think you copied my haircut a bit. You copied my haircut.
It's a home job.
But you copied my haircut, didn't you?
No, I didn't. I just got a haircut. That's what haircuts are.
All right, keep going with Carlos, mate.
I think it was a really good race, to be honest. Because it was an interesting race. Let's put it that way. A lot of action. I mean, the front was probably the place where there was the least action. It's cool that we have 2 Ferraris and 2 Red Bulls that are competitive. I feel a bit sorry for Checo because the cards just didn't fall for him this race. He sort of got stuck with that pit stop just before the Latifi's crash, which sort of ruined his assault on the front. But other than that, I mean, we definitely like I said, I want to see what happens this race in terms of setting up a hierarchy of teams. And 100% we have Ferrari and Red Bull, and then we have everyone else after that, because I mean, until we get to Europe and we see some major upgrades on cars. I mean, having said that, Mercedes did bring a major change to the back wing of that car for this round.
Didn't seem to give them any more top speed. I tell you that.
No, it didn't. They're still definitely or they're complaining that they just don't have the downforce. And I think they've got the porpoising issue still. But in terms of this race, we definitely saw that it's going to be a dogfight between Ferrari and Red Bull. And I'm just interested to see now how badly that double, DNF last week is going to hurt Red Bull in the long run, to be honest. Because if it's going to be this close all year, then that race betting could be costly, really.
Yeah, I think probably the most interesting consideration that we need to be aware of early in the season is until we get back to Europe, I don't think that's when we're going to see all these upgrades coming to the car. I was listening to the post-race, the F1 post-race show today, and it might have been Pietro Fittipaldi who was saying that because there's so much information that's being learnt every week, it's really hard for the teams to bring small upgrades, because what they're trying to do is, gather a lot more information and then have an upgrade package that's going to kind of take all of that into consideration. And because there's still so much learning happening with this new generation of car, he doesn't expect there to be really any significant development to the cars until around race 5. So that's an interesting consideration, and it's obviously because it's such a new concept that there's still a lot of validation that's happening. So I think that's really where the season will begin. We'll probably be a little bit like F1 used to be in the 90s, where you kind of, once the season in Europe starts, that's when you'll see the big upgrade begin. But I found that quite interesting.
What did you guys think of the way that the drivers were attacking that last DRS zone? And we sort of had a few occasions of drivers playing silly buggers, trying to stay sort of behind a car that they were clear on passing just to get the drag down the straight. I mean, we saw it with the Alpines were putting on a show for us at the start of that race, which I thought was real cool. But I mean, in terms of being a team principal, you didn't mind it?
I don't mind it because it's still like tactics, it's still strategy, it's still kind of is an element to the racing. If you watch other, like for example, if you watch NASCAR or IndyCar, particularly on oval racing, it's definitely not a new concept that you don't want to pass for the lead too early for fear of being passed back in opportune time.
All I would say is maybe they push the DRS line further up the straight so that there's not as much, jockeying into that last corner and sort of messing around, because it looks like it could be a safety hazard as well. Like if you get more than two cars.
Pretty sure that
around there,
where that detection zone is already like that whole straight before the detection zone is already a DRS zone.
So the detection zone is on that.
So
corner,
as they go around that corner, just before they hit the corner, is the detection zone. But that straight to get to that detection zone is a DRS zone as well.
Yeah, can I just ask? Excuse any ignorance. DRS isn't new, obviously. So I was trying to wrap my head around, I suppose, what was so different about it this year. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is it to do with the fact that there are more opportunities to take over, or because I was saying something at the end about the fact that you can follow more easily now? So someone just want to clarify that for me, if that's okay.
Yeah. So DRS has been around since what?
2011, I think.
Yeah, 2011.
Yeah.
The whole point of going to the ground effect car was so these cars could follow each other easier. And we've seen in the first 2 races already where cars have overtaken, and in the previous regulations, once that car overtook, the overtaken car couldn't couldn't follow. Whereas now, because they are able to follow, like look at Charles and Max, they're constantly battling each other, and that DRS is definitely aiding that. And I don't know what you guys think, but do you think we still, obviously it's early days, but do you think we still need the DRS zones?
Yeah. I think the DRS zones are always going to add a bit of spice, but maybe just short, like especially because that straight is so long. Like it wasn't really a problem on the other straight, but that last straight is so long and it's so early that you get a kick, and the other driver literally has nothing he can do to defend it. But then what happens is then that guy's following for the rest of the lap, and then they get to that same spot. And we saw it over and over again, sort of cars both locking up because I don't want to get in front for that DRS detection zone. And just like after a little while, it just sort of looks a bit novel. And then if you had 3 cars there, it would also probably get a bit dangerous.
Do you know what? Like the DRS works and probably work. It probably worked better in the past where the cars were more aero dependent from the top, but it still seems to be working effectively on these tracks where you can reach top speeds, obviously. However, it looks more novel than, say, push to pass in IndyCar. And I don't know if Formula One is at a stage now where, like, and they probably won't purely because they don't want to be the same as IndyCar, but push to pass rather than being able to overtake, every lap if you're within that detection zone. What it allows the attacker to do is to make a move if they want to, but it allows the defender to defend more effectively as well. And then it's more about managing that resource over the course of the race, as opposed to if you're within that particular range. So I don't know if that's a consideration that F1 might need to be aware of moving forward, but I think that it might be because I think particularly when now that the cars can travel more closely, we're going to see a lot more back and forth DRSing, and that should be the case. But is that going to make it seem more like a gimmick as opposed to in the past being able to actually get within the DRS zone was still a pretty good achievement because of the inability to follow in the watch of the car. But does it become a bit too gimmicky now that you can literally get overtaken and then move right back behind the car and then make a move again yourself?
It's funny you say that because that was like actually the question that I was going to raise with you. Like, if the whole point of the new regulations for aerodynamics of the cars was to ensure that cars can get past and, like you said, Harry, follow more easily, doesn't that in a way almost nullify the need for DRS? Like, don't get me wrong, I found it fantastic, the fact that there was this layer of strategy that was affecting every single lap, particularly at the end, like you said, Joe, the 2 Alpine cars, that was pretty cool. But does it almost nullify the need for it?
Probably not. Oh, sorry, H.
I think this track is a little bit of an anomaly because there is so many DRS zones and they're so close together. I think if you go somewhere like Spa or somewhere like that where you've got, you go through Eau Rouge and then you hit the DRS zone, but then there's not another one until the back end of the lap. I don't think it's going to have such a big effect, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
You'll probably see it mainly on this track and on Baku, really. I mean, these tracks sort of are built with these massive straights.
Maybe Melbourne now.
I will say this though, we only saw Jeddah a couple months ago because it was at the back end of last season, and the race yesterday, was miles more into, like, was the amount of entertainment I got from the 2 races was night and day. There was, I don't know if you just put that down to a win for Formula One, with the new car. But in terms of, like, I really wasn't interested in watching this race, and the end product that we got was far exceeded my expectations. What did you guys think about that? Or did that even cross your mind?
Before I push on with that, can I just make this point as well? Because it's literally stuck in my head.
No, you can't.
All right. Well, to answer your question, then I thought the product was also. I was just thinking this, just to parry back on the conversation that we were having before about the DRS and whatnot, right? Do you think that particularly on, like, for example, we're racing on a new track where it's very high speed. A lot of the new street circuits are high speed. Does the fact that the cars are able to go so fast, like, is that maybe a new strategy within Formula One to promote overtaking, to have these high speed tracks where the DRS does become a lot more effective, because rather than having to slow down, go to the lower gears and then come back up, you're kind of keeping cars at higher speeds throughout. And then the second point that I was going to make in response to Michael's question was about with the need for DRS anymore, with the cars becoming, like, with there being so much parity now between, or trying to develop some level of convergence in the field, without DRS, do we still have the same issue where people are able to follow really closely. But because again, we're racing on, really smooth tracks, and F1 cars don't really have a hole, not really punching a hole through the air to get a massive slipstream. Does that kind of just, if without DRS, would we have kind of a procession still?
I found it really, like even just from last year, and for someone who's not too experienced in watching Formula One in recent years, I mean, I quickly noticed how much of a competition a pass was. It wasn't just like pass and disappear, and I suppose that's the whole point of the new regulations. But I picked up on it straight away. So I guess the only reason why I was asking whether it's needed or not was because if the aerodynamic changes are doing what they're intended to do, which they clearly are, based on what we've seen first two races, and it's kind of made the racing more pure in a sense. That was why I kind of raised it. But I did think that the fact that there was a zone, like Harry said, there was a DRS zone heading into that back hairpin, and then also on the main straight, I found it really interesting to see how Verstappen kind of adapted to, okay, instead of passing him heading into the hairpin, I'm going to wait. It just added an element of like unpredictability, I think, which made it interesting. But at the same time, like, could it have been achieved without it anyway? Like, I don't know. I just thought that was just a question that popped up into my head as I was watching it. Like I said, to the untrained eye.
Give these car designers 2 years to mess around with these new body shapes, and I reckon they'll find new and interesting ways to achieve downforce on the outside of the car, and we'll have disrupted air in 2 years' time, and we'll need them again. So don't get rid of them yet.
Do you think that the FIA will be more how can I say it? Will they be more conscious of the fact that they want to keep it?
The FIA have already said that if they see a car or a design that kind of isn't within the spirit of the rules that they set, they have set, they will kind of say that you're not allowed to run that particular part. So
here's one thing
they're
that
actively
I think is
policing designs so that they stay within the spirit of the rules, not so they can't really get a loophole.
One thing I think is interesting is when they say stay within the spirit of the rules. Like we already know that within the first iteration of cars, they didn't foresee Mercedes running those negligible side pods. So I think in a way as well, their eyes have been open to just how, I mean, they always know how cluey these car sort of designers and aerodynamicists are. But I think as well, going forward, they're going to have to be a lot more, not stringent, but they're going to have to be a lot more aware of just how creative these people are if they want the designers to adhere to the spirit. Because I mean, I think Adrian Newey says it all the time, like there's no such thing as spirit of the rules. It's just interpretations and what we can gain from it. So I mean, expecting a team to adhere to the spirit of F1 and it's going to give them a disadvantage is not something that I think we can expect them to do.
Well, boys, I've got to ask this question. So Mercedes were in no man's land this whole race, and listening to Toto Wolff after the race, he was saying that their issue is that they have too much drag on that car. Now, I don't know if I believe it, or I don't know if he's trying to deflect from the fact that that car has got no top end speed at all when you look at it in comparison to the Ferrari and the Red Bull. But for that car that literally has no cross-sectional area compared to some other cars that it's racing against, to be like generating that much drag is an anomaly to me. And then taking into consideration where McLaren are and Williams are as well with the Mercedes engine and Aston Martin, I think that there might be a little bit of deflection going on from Toto to what the real problem is for that car.
100%.
George says he's got not enough aero. I mean, one thing that I noticed in that track was
that makes sense, but
well, you're saying they've got too much aero just now.
No, I'm saying that for a car that has literally got like no cross-sectional area, it should be very, it should not have a lot of drag, and it should be all aero power, all engine power. Whereas Wolff is saying that they have too much drag on a car that's got literally a zero bodywork feature.
I would think that what's happened is they've rolled out that engine with Lewis at the end of last year, and we saw a massive step forward. And they've probably taken it to the bank that the engine was probably good enough for this year, and they've probably devoted a lot of their time into making sort of interesting aerodynamic decisions. I mean, the thing about McLaren, when you mention, is that we know that they were really fast at Catalunya, and we don't know if it's just these Middle Eastern tracks and the heat temperature and the brakes that's sort of hampering them. I mean, it's probably going to be more than that as well. But
Did any of you listen to Lando Norris's post-race today?
Yeah.
No, what did he say?
Scathing.
What did he say?
Absolutely scathing. He said
What do you mean?
he said that the car's still nowhere. He came 7th. He said
Yeah,
obviously
but these
I know
drivers
that.
saying that.
I know. I
that
understand
car,
that.
Dude,
I understand that.
We're hearing Lewis having a dummy spit.
They're all having dummy splits.
Everyone's having dummy spits. I mean, you can't ask drivers what they think of cars because they always want more.
I genuinely think it's the Merc power unit. I think McLaren haven't maximized the design, but I also think that these drivers are still trying to find setups.
Yeah, there are so many variables at this stage of the season. I mean, we're racing on like this track is a speedway. I mean, when we come to a slower track, we're going to see probably differences again. Like during the race, the way that the midfield cars are ordered and how they are running at the start of the race, in the middle of the race, and the race is so different. We've seen all the cars racing against each other, which is awesome. But I think it's too early to really start. Like, here's the thing, that the Mercedes is faster than every other car except the Ferrari and the Red Bull. Like, we know that. I mean, I was interested seeing sort of Lewis struggle during the race, which was surprising. But George had no problem running a quiet race outside the top 4. He literally didn't see no one and wasn't sort of challenging anyone.
What was fascinating was to watch Mercedes against Haas, just to think about that, and also just to think about how, like Silverstone last year, Hamilton was able to go from a 15-second penalty that put him at the back of the grid and in the middle of nowhere to winning the race, whereas now from 18th, he was able, the best he was able to do was to climb to 10th. So that makes the racing a lot more intriguing.
What we have to remember as well is that Haas literally did nothing to that car last year. They did a Ferrari, but they did nothing last year in terms of that car. They've been working on that car for longer than a lot of.
Yeah, I understand that, but like, you're still putting them up against the powerhouse team, like we're probably the most successful team in Formula One history. Yeah,
well, I actually found it interesting that K-Mag was racing so well against. I mean, K-Mag himself has. I mean, for a guy who's just jumped into that car, I mean, am I giving him too much props? But I just keep getting impressed with him these last 2 weekends.
They said he might have broken or injured his neck in qualifying.
He was saying that he just.
I said the G-force was because he's not used
to
it.
He hasn't been training.
Yeah, crazy. Really
Doesn't
interesting.
the fact that the cars are able to stay within touching distance of each other almost validate? I know you're saying it's early, but isn't that like what the regulations, the new regulations, are intended to do? Like, for me, that's a way more interesting product. Like the fact that, okay, we have had 2 races where the front runners have been more or less battling it out, but at the same time, it's like you said, the middle to back of the pack, it's kind of anybody's game, and I found that way more interesting.
100%.
Got a question, H?
Yeah, look, we obviously know that Red Bull and Ferrari are the strongest 2 cars at the moment. We know Mercedes are going to catch up eventually. I think their big upgrade package is going to come, like we said, in Europe. Hopefully their engine package improves. But what do we think about the other teams? We're looking at Alpine, who are looking quite strong all weekend. Ocon must have thought he was back in the racing point. We've got. Yeah.
Do you know what the best form guide I thought was for the midfield? The fact that from 5th onwards, all the teams that were in the midfield had a representation in the top 10. The only teams that didn't, obviously, was Alfa Romeo, because Bottas had the engine problem. Williams were obviously out of it, and then Aston Martin is still lacking in that regard. But all of those teams, McLaren, Toro Rosso, Alpine. Who's the other one?
But
They
even
all had-
before-
I'm
They
gonna
all
say-
had
before the engine
representation in
failures,
the.
Where in
They all had
where-
representation in the back of the top 10.
I'm going to
Yeah.
say this
Five.
quickly. We was discussing the battle between McLaren and Ferrari at the end of last year, and who was going to get, ahead this year. And I think obviously Ferrari has gotten ahead, but McLaren has dropped well behind, I think, a few other teams at the moment. Like if you look at the Alpine, seems to be a better package at the moment. Debatably, the Alfa Romeo is a better package at the moment,
Haas.
and even the Haas is a better package at the moment.
Yeah,
I mean,
100%.
yeah,
for all the talking that McLaren did, they really have to start, putting some results in, I'd say.
in McLaren's defense though, without Daniel's retirement, they would have had 2 cars in the points.
Yeah, but
And their quali was horrible again. Like outside, neither of them made Q3. But Daniel was, I think, P9 when he went down.
but Alonso retired as well, like him. Same thing.
Actually, a few
Yeah.
cars ended
I'm
up
just
retiring,
saying,
eh?
like it.
They
They
did
all
improve.
retired on the same lap. They all retired, and that change in performance within a week.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. They
yeah.
definitely
Make the
made a
argument-
step in the 1 week.
You make the argument that, yes, Ferrari improved, they took a step, but McLaren, you could make the argument that they stood pat while other teams improved, also aided by the new regs. That's one way of looking at it too.
McLaren could
Yep.
have just over-designed it though. Like they're running that totally different suspension. They might take a bit longer to get the benefits from that.
They might have overcompensated for the fact that they thought that their engine was more competitive too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I mean, if you think about anyone in a Mercedes engine right now, like based off of how, like McLaren did a really good job with the Renault engine, and then they took a visible step when they pretty much put a Mercedes engine in the same car, and then that gave them a few tenths, and now they've lost any advantage that they had with that car. So, they might have a half decent engine. But from what we're seeing with Mercedes obviously doesn't have a good car, but they also don't have a good engine. So they might gain, a significant advantage once that upgrade comes to the Mercedes power unit. So it's still way too early to tell. Like the thing is, these cars are so new. They've had some testing, but again, look at the fatality rates of some of these engines as well. Like these engines and these cars are still having some significant teething issues, and it's to be expected. I think until we get back to Europe, we're going to see a little bit more uncertainty, and then once the upgrades come and teams start getting on top of the cars with a little bit more information and data, then we might have a little bit more of a clear pecking order. But it definitely does make for compelling watching.
I think after Monaco and Baku and the first 6 or 7 races and we start going to tracks like Spa and all those old school Hungary, all that type of track, I think we're going to see maybe where those developments are going to put these teams at for the rest of the year.
I agree.
Nick?
Mickey.
Topic as well.
Nice little segue there, Harry, because the second thing that I was thinking about, couldn't help but think about as I was watching it, and to not be a naysayer in any way, because I think these new tracks are interesting.
That's not you.
At all. I think they're really interesting. Obviously, Jeddah is just unbelievable for pace. But I don't know. For me, there's something about racing at night, and it might be because I can't see or hear the fans, and you haven't got those packed grandstands at these Arab circuits.
There were no fans, mate.
But there's just something about it that just doesn't have, for me, the same soul. Like we talked about last year, we spoke about Interlagos and just and Coda, and how you could hear the roar of the fans as the car, the car, who was it? Whoever made the pass going into the first corner, just that roar of the fans, and just the old school circuits full of like emotion. I don't know. For me, as fun as Jeddah was, there's just something about those circuits that, to me, and it could be because they're at night, the races are at night as well. It just seems a little bit soulless to me. So I don't know. What do you guys
The
think?
sad thing about these Saudi, like Arabic, Middle Eastern tracks is that the money for the racing doesn't come from fans and ticket sales. It's not because there's a demand from the fans to race there. It comes from sponsorship money. It comes from Aramco. It comes from golf.
I understand that.
From
We witnessed that firsthand this weekend with the old missile hitting the freaking
Well, that's
fuel
another
station.
There's just something about those circuits. They just look too perfectly manicured and they just,
shit,
I don't know,
mate.
it just doesn't have
Just-
that edge.
just
It
say
doesn't
it,
have
they're
that
shit.
edge. It doesn't have the edge to me, and I don't know. I just don't think you can replicate what the other more traditional circuits that are packed
what you can't replicate
involve.
is passion. And I mean, what we've got in all of those, a lot of European tracks, a lot of the South American, not a lot of the South, but the Latin tracks as well. Even
Your
places
sound's
like-
gone
Quiet,
weird.
a bit quiet, mate.
Sorry. I mean, sorry, I was just having a drink before. What you can't replicate is that passion. And with all the European tracks, with all the, all the South American tracks where they've raced there in the past as well, even when you look at a place like Coda, as amazing as the track is, struggled for a number of years developing any kind of fanfare. And it was almost going to be scrubbed off the championship because it was still dependent on, ticket sales. A lot of these tracks that we've got
to survive.
a lot of these tracks that we have in the Middle East, though, they're purely there because sponsors are paying huge amounts of money to sponsor Formula One, and it's not dependent on ticket sales at all. If people go, it's great, fantastic, but it's not really a dependent. So until we get back to some more of those traditional tracks, you won't see that passion, unfortunately.
You know what I love about these Arabic tracks? They have, the 10 people in the grandstand that they continuously pass to when something happens on track, and it's the
chick in
same.
the back, just
And they're just like, and it's
losing
like
it for
that's
Verstappen.
the same person you showed us last time.
Yeah.
I've got a controversial question for you guys, actually,
Go for
about this weekend. What did you think about the decision to actually race on the weekend after the oil field bombing?
Pretty disappointed.
Yeah, I was pretty pissed off, mate.
I mean,
Because
I would say if they were racing in a country close to Russia and that happened, they would have been like, "No, we're packing up. We're getting out of here."
It's not even that. It's the fact that you can't make a big stance. And,
Mhm.
the FIA made a huge stance saying that Russian drivers couldn't race in pretty much any FIA sanctioned event. And we also know that there's issues in Saudi Arabia and the
Mhm.
Middle East that are similar to what's happening in Russia right now. It's just not nearly well as televised. But imagine if Russia was the Russian government had, a company that was financially incentivizing Formula One like Aramco does. You probably have the same situation, and it's just very interesting that it happened so soon. Like the Russian conflict is still very much at the center of everyone's mind, and for F1 still not to be able to, or not to have the balls to cancel the event, kind of shows how deeply the Middle East is in their pocket.
It's not even about having the ball. It's not even about having the balls to cancel the event.
It is about having the balls. It's all about balls.
All they have to say is, we only care about money. And if they said we only care about money, and then all their decisions were made around money, we'd all understand. But you can't pretend to care about other humanitarian issues. And then when the first event happened, the first chance you have of making a stance because you care about these humane situations or even the safety of your drivers and teams, you go, we're going to go racing. I mean, that drivers meeting went from, I think, 10 at night
4
till
hours.
4 in the morning or something like that.
And you know what? Good on the drivers for standing up
What were they
Because-
fighting for? Sorry,
to
They
leave.
to leave.
to leave what, Jeddah?
Yeah.
Because there was a
There was a missile attack while they were doing FP3.
nine
FP2.
Ks on the track.
Wow. You know what? Really befuddles me to an extent. If you're going to use
Tell
a
us
funny
what
word.
befuddles you.
Look, it's obviously a money grab.
Michael's befuddlements. That should be a segment.
That can be the title of this one.
Yeah.
No, look, like I get it. I understand the market, the market there and the sponsorship deals. I get it. It's almost as if, in a way, F1's they've kind of super leagued themselves. Like that, they see the money there. They obviously have they made the championship longer? Has that happened, or is it still the same amount of races? Is it a longer
24.
championship now?
We're at 24. We're going to go to 30 by the sound of things.
Yeah. So look, I understand the whole money aspect, and I
Which
get
is
that.
ridiculous.
I just think like for me, it's just different. I get that. But at the same time, you know, has the sport grown? Yes. So is it having some kind of positive effect? Yeah. And if I suppose the more money it brings in, the more, you know, cars can get innovated and things like that. One other thing that I only noticed this week because I didn't watch race one, were the winglets on the wheels.
Yeah.
I did a bit of reading up onto like what they're intended to do and how they create less of this wake that Anthony keeps referring to and things like that. I find that looks pretty cool. Just from a
I think they look crap.
point of view. I don't know. For me, that it was just something different.
No,
And
I
I don't
think
know.
the
What do you
cars
guys
look
feel
sick.
about these covers on the wheels? Are you a fan? I was looking at the McLaren. I couldn't buy it. Hey, I couldn't buy it.
Because the McLaren has
Mate.
has that stupid rainbow color. If you look at this,
That's
the
Google.
Alfa Romeo, it looks nice.
I love McLaren, but they're becoming way too sponsory. Like every single section of that car is
Because they don't
is
have a
up
primary
for
sponsor.
sale.
Alfa Romeo look unbelievable. I
Yeah,
must
the
say.
Alfa
But that
looks-
car just looks hot, and so does Alfa Tauri. Always looks clean, but Alfa Romeo, holy goodness! What a car.
Nothing comes close to the Ferrari this year, mate.
I quickly want to
Classic.
just go back to something quickly. We're talking about sort of the missile strike. Then we were sort of discussing about the whole Russia thing. Now we've quickly mentioned the push to make it a 30 race season. At the same time, we've heard teams saying there's no way, every time they add one race, it's making it harder for the teams for the teams like
to survive.
not the teams to survive, just for their
Personnel.
employees
To get people around.
the employees away from the family. 30 weeks out of a 52 30 races in a 52 week year, plus all the flying around.
But even financial outlay, Joe. Like, I mean,
It's not
every
even that.
race,
It's
how much
it's
more
the
money?
It's the human aspect of it.
the
It's
human
the
aspect
toll.
of it.
It's
Yeah,
the human toll.
They've got families that these the mechanics and the drivers have families, but asking them to take more time away from their families. I mean, I've never heard, it's weird. Like 10 years ago, we had an 18 round season and that was fine. I mean, we're slowly pushing up, but they're going, we could have a 30 race season. Why couldn't we just stop it at this and then just sort of interchange races every year?
Do you think
Currently
it
we're
lessens the
looking-
magnitude?
What's
Yeah,
that,
I
sorry?
do.
Like, it takes away that grandeur of a Grand Prix in a way. If you've got so many, you kind of water them down, don't you?
100%.
Like I'll admit, last year it got to. I think we had 23 last year. I think around 22, 23, I was like, no, I'm done. Like as good as the end of the season was, I was like, no, this is enough.
Do you know what the other thing
Owners on
is?
each race, hey?
Do you know what the other thing is, guys, that needs to be a part of the championship? There needs to be a physical impact of a DNF.
Yeah.
Whereas with the way that the points are structured, you can have a DNF, and after 22 races, if you were to win a significant amount of those races, a DNF doesn't mean anything. Whereas when
How
you
do
had
you
an
mean?
8, well, because let's say you come first, you get 25 points. If I come second, I get 18 points. So if you just simply times that by
Oh, yeah, okay.
7
I
by
get it.
20,
Points gap.
there's a lot more points there than if you were to get a DNF. Whereas if you had an 18 race season like we did in the past, it didn't necessarily mean that your season was over if you lost, if you had a DNF, but it definitely had a lot more value. There was a lot more value per point than there are now because there's so many more points available. And again, it waters it down. I think Harry was completely right. By the end of last year, with the way that the championship finished, yes, it was exciting. Yes, it was engaging. But gee, it got long in the tooth. I mean,
But
it got
also-
long in the tooth.
I mean,
So what
also
are you saying here?
we're looking
You're
at a
saying-
sport that is implementing cost capping, right? We're implementing a cost cap to help keep the teams funded. And at the same time,
More
we're going to go,
sustainable.
let's add a 20% longer season. So you've got 20% more expenses for racing, hotels, damage.
I think you'll find. I think they prorata that cost cap. So if they raise the amount of races, they'll get more budgeting, I guess.
What
I
happened with
just,
Haas? Like
I think,
they
I think the F1 like itself is contradicting itself at every turn at the moment, just because their messaging is so mixed. I mean, even the idea of just going, yeah, we can run 30 races, like straight away it's such a big jump.
Apparently,
I mean,
we're about to hear about Vegas is about to be launched or announced.
another track in Vegas.
A track in Vegas.
Why don't they do what Supercars do and have two series, a Western Conference and an Eastern Conference? Run two separate teams.
what was the deal with Haas guys? Like they mentioned something about the fact that they were worried about Mick Schumacher binning another car, so they wouldn't be able to run in
There's not enough,
Melbourne. What was the
not
deal
enough
there?
spare parts because these
So-
cars are so new.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So it was just
And that track, like we saw that both Williams go. We saw multiple things happen. The likelihood of something happening was higher than any other track. So
There's no room for error on that track because it's so tight. And I think they just thought the yield for points in Melbourne was looking better than having him circulate in a somewhat restored car and then having another accident and leaving no parts for Melbourne. So it's just it's probably a smart decision, really. Anyway,
I doubt that he was, I thought he was, feeling well enough to race anyway after an accident like that. That was
it was pretty quick. It was pretty quick.
Huge impact. Okay, we've kind of been shooting the bull for a little bit on Formula One. So obviously we don't have to wait too long for the Melbourne race. 10 days away from now, which is really exciting for us. Obviously, Sydney siders H will be there in person to give us the
To bring
on-track
COVID back.
experience. Yeah, that's exactly right. But to give us the on-track experience. But to finish up about Formula One, are there any finishing talking points that you're looking forward to looking forward to see in Melbourne, boys?
Not really. I think I'm just looking forward to see F1 back on track in Melbourne. I mean, it's so hard to sort of gauge what to expect, other than the battle between Mercedes, Red Bull, and Ferrari at the moment. I mean, I'm just happy to see them back at Albert Park after 2 years.
Yeah, first
Yeah, I
time in 3
agree.
years.
I think for me, I just want to see. I don't even know if I'll be able to watch it, to be honest. I think I'll be flying, but I just want to see fans packing a circuit out. Back in Australia, it's always good. I'd love to be there because I've never been there. So I'd really hope that I can get there next year. Jealous of that, Harry.
Do you reckon they'll mob the track after like Buddy Franklin's 1,000th goal?
I reckon it's going to be packed. Hey, what do you reckon, Harry?
Nah, there's a cap.
there's a cap this year to allow for, but still, it's a huge number. It's not like they capped it
At 10,000.
Yeah,
I think it's 90,000. Is it
They capped it
90,000?
because of COVID.
yeah. I thought it was 100, but yeah.
Oh, there you go.
What difference does it make? What
I don't
what's
think it's
the
for
actual
COVID. I
difference
think
that it makes,
there's another reason for it, isn't it? Not COVID. Is it a COVID cap?
I think so. We're not packed in there like sardines, I guess.
Oh, fair enough.
But looking forward to seeing McLaren if they can make the jump. Like when I bought the tickets, McLaren were performing quite well in 2021, so I'll be pretty upset if DR finishes outside the points. Hopefully he gets a top 10 finish.
Imagine if you won.
Oh, mate, I won't be coming back. That's for sure.
Pray for some rain. Actually,
Yeah.
You missed
Do I want to be out in the rain, but
Just keep imagining, mate.
The first race of the season. I think there used to be a magic about it being the first race of the season.
we'll be back
Yeah.
I
next.
missed that.
I think
that's-
it'll be
that's-
back.
That's a self-imposed sanction anyway. We've done that to ourselves, so don't complain too much about it.
People.
I'm also looking forward to seeing what the track does, the new layout, what it does to the racing. So
That's a good point, actually.
Hmm.
Well, why don't we push it on then with the other form of racing that we partook in over the weekend, which was the Supercars round 2 at Symmons Plains in Tasmania. Interesting weekend of racing. I think that if you were just to look at the, we just lost Mick. Was that by
He
design?
left.
he waved.
Oh, did he?
He
Yeah.
just doesn't care about supercars.
Okay, fair enough. If you were just to look at the
What a weekend.
if you were just to look at the results, I don't think you would think much of the weekend, but what an awesome weekend of racing it was in the Supercars. I mean, for those of you that haven't watched it, Van Gisbergen had a clean sweep of the weekend, but we saw Feeney get his first podium. We saw Grove get back on Grove Racing, get their first podium as Grove Racing, which was great to see. Tigford had a podium, even though they kind of struggled mightily over the weekend, and we saw some real struggles from the early season favourites out of WAU and Chaz Mostert. So, boys, where do we begin here?
Let's talk about Andrew Edwards and Triple Eight, because you made such a big deal about it last time, I reckon.
All right, then.
All right. They looked so unsung. I was thinking about you the whole week, and I was just like, I wonder if Amp's watching this and thinking what I'm thinking.
The only race I missed was the second race because I had a blackout.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, I did.
I mean, we know how good Triple Eight are at Symmons Plains, and they did not miss a beat. I mean, I didn't expect them to, because they rolled off the track with no setup problems at all. And I mean, in qualifying, when they rolled out in qualifying, and they seemed to be the only big team that had literally no struggles, I thought, okay, this is going to be probably a Gizzer, sweep. I thought that the moment I saw their pace, but it was the thing that sort of surprised me was not surprised me because the track is such a interesting track for it. But when you qualify at the back, problems happen. So like we saw Walkinshaw and Tickford really shoot themselves in the foot this week. I mean, Dick Johnson Racing had a pretty decent weekend as well. Their cars had pretty decent pace.
And I think Will Davison had a great week.
Yeah, I mean, we spoke a bit critically about Will Davison last time about like what can he bring to the team in terms of pace and outshining Anton. But I think this week he actually looked really good, going for the ahead in the season. And I think we saw some really good flashes from like Grove. Matt Stone Racing had a few flashes, even though they fucking shoot themselves in the foot every time. Even Team 18 had a few decent results. I mean, there was enough good results spread around for, I think, all the teams to sort of get something out of it.
I think most teams would have got something from it, but the problem was, while they were all kind of following each other around to some extent, the reality was at the top, Triple Eight was always there, and the other teams were all squabbling, if that makes sense. So they maximised it.
Erebus was
struggled,
had a struggle week, sort of like Walkinshaw as well. To be honest, they just couldn't lock in a decent setup that they could run. And I was a bit surprised with that, to be honest. What do you think?
Well, I as a fan, it was a difficult weekend to watch. I think if you didn't like Triple Eight Racing, I think if you watched Van Gisbergen, how particularly coming out of the back hairpin, how much more hooked up that car was, how easy it was for him to turn that car, get it pointed, and to make a huge run down that back straight. The car was just in a league of its own. So in that regard, it kind of it wouldn't have the most enthralling racing, because there was a level of predictability about what was happening in the racing.
What do you think about his bump and runs coming out of the hairpin?
At first, well, I'm not going to lie, I was annoyed because I was annoyed because probably he was doing it. But if Waters was to do the same thing and get away with it, I probably would have said, what an amazing move. So objectively, I think it's good hard racing.
Waters defended it too today in an interview.
Defended what?
Because someone asked him, what do you think about the hard racing from Van Gisbergen? And he said, if that was me, I would have done the exact same thing.
Yeah, and that's what I thought too.
I think we saw a few examples during the weekend of when you do it badly, especially like with Winterbottom. I think on was it Holdsworth? I mean, that sort of is a textbook of how not to do it. And Gizzer did it probably 3 times in 3 laps, or in a short span of time, and every time he got it on the mark. So I mean, I thought it was definitely gamesmanship, but it was. I mean, we love the rubbing is racing in Supercars. So I just wanted to hear what you guys had to say about it, because in a vacuum, I would say it's fine. I mean, it's always a bit harder to get your bearings on it when your team is involved. That's I wanted to hear what you wanted to say. Yeah. But
it annoyed me. Like it annoyed me in the moment. I'm like, I had an issue with it.
yeah,
Then obviously once you detach yourself from the fact that you've got any kind of vested interest in it, then it's I was what I was telling. I was talking to Thomas. Came and watched the third race with me, and I said if I was pulling that move off in one of our sim races and someone had the shits at me for it, I'll tell them to shut up and keep racing.
you probably do that anyway most of the time.
Yeah,
So
probably. So I kind of thought, the move was clean enough. Like there was a bit of rubbing, but a bit of rubbing's fine. And the one thing that I kind of thought was interesting though, is in the case of Van Gisbergen, Waters and Davidson were very, very good in the space that they gave him. I felt like they could have, if they had have stayed on it and got hit, they very easily could have, the car could have just gone in front of Van Gisbergen. And I think Holdsworth and Winterbottom was a little bit more like that. Whereas they kind of gave him a bit more space. And the reality is if the car is that good, entering and exiting that corner and you're able to get that kind of run, well then more than, the driver did a great job, but if the car's that hooked up and it looked easy and it probably was pretty easy as well. So kudos to them. They really had it hooked up. They looked like they are right back to their winning ways because Feeney had a phenomenal race as well. So obviously it was more than just Van Gisbergen having a good race, but more of the same.
kudos to them. I mean, I think definitely. I mean, what did you think, Harry? Actually, because you were pretty vocal on the chat about how you were enjoying this weekend.
Yeah, look, I came into this weekend. I watched the TCR and S5000 around here a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
And when I saw that the supercars were going here, I thought, Jesus Christ, this track's tiny. How are these massive supercars going to go around here? I did not think it would be conducive to good racing, and it was freaking awesome.
Yeah.
I was genuinely surprised because there's not much to that track.
No.
But I think it is the size of it means that the field is so bunched up that there's something happening all the time. I think one of the craziest things I saw was I think it was Waters and
Slade.
After the hairpin down that straight that's not a straight.
Yeah.
And Waters bumped him a bit, and man, that car could have flipped so easily at that speed.
Roll, yeah.
But also like the reaction of everyone, like Waters and who else was around to brake and let him go over the track again. That was an awesome bit of driving. I loved it.
That incident really disappointed me, to be honest, and it's probably not for the reasons that it would disappoint most people, but I feel like as a team, sort of Tickford needed to maximize this round because last round they had a shocker, and in the first race, Waters showed he had decent pace. He qualified on pole, ended up coming fourth or third. And then I thought, all right, even though he's not in the top three in this second race, he was definitely in the wrong in that, sort of pushing Tim.
Do you reckon he was in the wrong?
I think once you get that far across the track, you're in the wrong. Yeah.
He did the same thing to Van Gisbergen,
Who?
Exactly the same thing.
Who?
Waters.
Yeah, well then he's in the wrong twice, but this time Slady didn't want to give up. He was definitely up far enough for him to earn that room. But I just I think in terms of like when you look back on it, that totally ruined his race. Like there's no doubt about it, that ruined his race. He probably had a top 5 there, and he got dropped back to where did he end up, like 16th.
18th.
Yeah. So nothing points. I mean, what do you think about that? Because I just thought, man, what are you doing? Like
I thought
you
it was
need to bank
harsh.
some points. No, I don't think it was harsh.
I don't know if there was a drive-through penalty in it.
Why? What else are you going to get for something like that? You ruined Slady's race.
But I thought it was kind of a situation where it was just a racing incident. They both, were
You probably
fighting
would because you love that kind of move in the Sims.
I feel that Waters may have seen a bit of the red mist at that point because he's shut him off. He's pushed him off the track, but there's a little jink of the Tickford that's what pushes Slade off. And it was like he just saw red and made the move and didn't even think about it. That's the impression I got.
Well, after the race, he was definitely not remorseful at all. And he there was one part when he said, like, I definitely left him enough room. I was like, man, you need to watch the replay because there wasn't enough room there at all. I mean, the thing with that track is if once you get the inside on that hairpin, you've got the advantage. Even, I mean, I didn't even know what side drafting was till this weekend.
Yeah,
same. And then what's
you watch
his name?
NASCAR?
Yeah, but I never really understood what it was. Like, no one's ever drawn a picture like Larko did, and then Larko draws his awesome
basic pictures.
His basic pictures, and it just opens the eyes of us plebs about what he's talking about. Like, so good.
He cracked me up every time he tried to change the screen. It was still on the text and he was getting the shits about it.
But the thing is, moving forward, that track is such an anomaly, really, of the season. Like, do you know what I was thinking about as well? We were talking like a couple of weeks ago about adding more cars onto the grid. I think if you add more cars onto the grid, that track won't survive because that thing is such a mess at the best of times. I really think, I don't know why they don't run that qualifying system that they were using a couple
the 2 tiers
years ago when they had the 2 tiers, because the qualifying on that track is such
chaos.
Yeah, such chaos. I mean, it's awesome in terms of you don't know where you're going to end up, but I think it's so easy for cars not to get a good run in because of accidents, number one, just like yellow flags and all that kind of stuff.
In their defense, though, there were 3 different pole sitters. Like, that's pretty awesome over the weekend.
Yeah, it's awesome, but I mean, I'm not complaining about it like that much. I'm just saying, like, they've run this system before, and I feel like on track, it's built for tracks like that, where there's not really enough room. What is it, 50 seconds spread between 27, 26, 25 cars. So it's like you got 2 seconds of space max. I just think for stuff like that, there might be a bit of room for inventiveness when it comes to qualifying as well.
They tried it in the past. The only issue that they had was with the fact that if one group has a better, track scenario, amount of UV on the track and things like that, they had the qualifying still set up so that it was based off of the times when they were amalgamated. So maybe it might be something like in NASCAR where you split them in half based on their practice times. But then if you qualify first, if you qualify first in one group and first in the second, that kind of sets up the different rows of the grid. So that way, regardless of if the track surface has a different feeling and, one whole group can perform better than the other group that goes out, it's still not going to affect, like, you're still qualifying relative to, your position, as opposed to doing 2 separate groups and then amalgamating their times in one big chart.
No, I'm talking about the one when they base when the qualifying group is set of practice. So if you qualify in the top 15 in practice,
the MotoGP setup.
Yeah, like the one they run with that. Then you have the bottom 10 qualify, bring some in, because then the track temperatures have nothing to do with it. I think the thinking is they're trying to save sets of tires. I mean, that's the only thing that I can really think of it. But realistically, that track is like nothing else in the season, and we see like between 1st and 20th, there's like 2.5 tenths in qualifying, which is insane. Then also you see like race 2, Chaz qualifies 18th. And
moves up to 4th,
and then he moves up to 4th just on race pace. You know what I mean? Like, so in terms of,
did he use up a lot of tires in that race? But
no, I mean, he used up the normal sets of tires. He just had good pace. I mean, in the first race, he had good pace as well. He sort of got stuck in that incident between Winterbottom and Holdsworth, which he was on pace to move ahead and probably get 5th or 4th in that race, and then the third race, he got re-ended in the opening laps, and then he never had pace after that. I mean, I don't know if it was there was something damaged in the. Yeah, I mean, who knows what it is, but that's that's the price you pay for starting in the backfield, really. I mean, even Percat, they both got hampered in qualifying because of a flag got thrown, but even Percat moved up from 21st to 10th. So the cars had race pace. They just didn't have enough qualifying set up, and they're notoriously bad at that track anyway. But I mean, the weekend that Triple Eight had, you can't let if you're a team that's trying to push to get to the top, you can't let them have it without at least consolidating a decent amount of points for yourselves. You know what I mean?
And it was also disappointing. I thought, particularly in race 3, I thought Anton really had a good chance to take the race to Van Gisbergen. But then when Giza, I don't know what happened to Anton on his push laps after his pit stop, or Van Gisbergen himself, but coming out of the pits, it wasn't even nearly really that close. So you have to just say that Triple Eight team really just had a pinpoint weekend all around.
Executed everything perfectly.
Yeah, and you just have to give them kudos to that. They did, everything that was expected from them, and based on their past history. So frustrating as that might be for us fans, you just got to tip the cap to that. Looking forward, though, I think the interesting thing is going to be, obviously, the Supercars goes back to Melbourne for the first time in a long time. That's 4 100-kilometre races. So really short races. Tickford have been very competitive there in the past. WAU have been very competitive there in the past. Obviously, Dick Johnson as well has been very competitive there in the past. So there's a lot of the top performing teams that have got fairly recent success at Albert Park. So it'll be interesting to see if they're able to take the race to Triple Eight, obviously. But also, it's just great to see those cars, moving on the Grand Prix circuit. And with the changes that there obviously are to the track layout as well, I think you're going to see a lot more, particularly for the supercars that are so, I don't want to say drag dependent, but, where slipstreaming is so available and accessible, particularly around the back of that track, you might actually see a few lunging moves going into those last couple of corners, which will make for great racing.
I think that the track changes will be worse for the supercars because you're losing one good dive opportunity for them.
But you can also, but they're also building one really long streaming opportunity.
Yeah, I suppose so. Before we move there quickly, I just wanted to sort of talk about a few of the honourable mentions from this weekend. I mean, I wanted to sort of discuss number one,
and MSR.
Hazelwood and MSR showed so much promise, and the thing was, LeBrock did LeBrock things. He qualified good, and then here's the thing: I don't know if that car was set up properly for the race 3.
Surely not. Surely not. It was literally waving the magic wand and hoping it stuck. And they were saying that during the race, that there wasn't even aligned, it wasn't balanced. So the fact I would say that he didn't do LeBrock things because he got off the line like a demon.
Yeah, fair enough. Well,
he did everything he could to set up for that race.
Well, from this weekend, I thought we saw really good things from Matt Stone Racing, like promise of things that they definitely haven't showed for like they're looking really competitive in that midfield. Grove look like they've taken a step forward as well, which was really good. And I mean, they're running a new driver in Holdsworth who looks like he's coming along as well. I mean, the one I couldn't understand was Heimgartner, because he showed so much pace in the first 2 rounds, and he keeps getting caught up in these problems. And I don't really want to blame him for the one with him and LeBrock that looked a bit like a racing incident. But I mean, if you're Brad
not
Jones,
helping them.
Yeah, he's not helping them. He's not helping himself, because he's definitely shown so much more potential than what the points tally he's got this year has sort of
it would indicate.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, what do you think about that? Because
I think the point you made about MSR is great. I think they're kind of showing that as a team they're coming of age. They're definitely not there just to fill up the numbers anymore. And I think the same can be said for Premier Racing as well. Obviously, they haven't
Yeah.
shown the same level of like the same heights yet, but they definitely aren't at the bottom. And you can already see a progression from what Techno was doing over the last couple of years, and they've only had 2 races, and they're a totally new team.
Yeah.
So for them to be that, I don't want to say switched on at this stage because they've still got a ways to go, but for them to be in and around, the top 15, let's say, is an improvement. And they've got Jacobsen and Pither, and they're kind of really, I thought they're kind of showing some of their best, racing since they've been in their category. Yeah,
like he surprised me this weekend with the pace he was showing.
So that's really good to see. But I think MSR particularly have to be, really happy with where they're at. And the interesting thing is going to be, in the past, we saw Walkinshaw, Tickford. If they had an off day for them might be 10th, and then it's very easy to fix it up in the race and pull out a top 5. But I think we saw Mostert, we saw Waters, all in qualifying, had a bad qualifying session, and they're back in 18th. And it makes it a lot harder because, those teams that have improved themselves are becoming a little bit more challenging. And I think the biggest thing that I'm seeing is that unless Brad Jones as a team, obviously they've got 4 cars, either they consolidate, I think, and move to less cars with better quality drivers, or with those 3rd and 4th cars, they need to be thinking about hopefully improving the driver lineup at the back end, because right now they're pulling up the rear of the field.
What about I don't like bad mouthing drivers really, but I think Jake Kostecki has had.
He's had a lot of bad luck.
He's had a lot of bad.
It's induced.
I mean,
self-induced.
He's had probably the worst start of the year, especially for a car that's pretty decent. I mean, he's the worst of the Tickford fleet, and not even
Randall's a rookie.
Randall's a rookie, and it's not even close, really. I mean, Courtney's showing pretty good stuff, like for someone who's sort of at the end of their career. I mean, I wouldn't even move on from him because he's showing to be the second best car in that fleet at the moment.
I said it last week. I said I don't really expect anything from Randall all year. He'll have a kind of up and down year. That's to be expected. He's had.
Have we got the same sort of expectations for him that we would have for Feeney, just a bit lower because of the car he's in? No, we're not expecting wins from Feeney. We're just expecting consistency. We're just expecting consistency from Randall as well.
I think Feeney, because he's in the top, like his AAA is by far the
top dog,
and the car is at a point where it's, he should be getting podiums and things like that. Tickford are in a bit of a precarious situation where the team is not performing that well, and you've got Waters and to an extent Courtney, I think, outperforming the car slightly. So the fact that I saw, Randall did some ordinary things this weekend. He also got a top 10 in race 3, and looked, pretty comfortable. So he's showing improvement over the course of the weekend as well. But there's no excuse for Kostecki to be behind Randall. And as far as I'm concerned, if that continues, I think it's a one and done season for him in a half decent team. So
as in for the series or just for Tickford?
No, for Tickford.
Okay.
Tickford. I mean, I think with the sponsorship he has and the name that he has, he'd probably find himself another drive. But, not at Tickford perhaps, because they really need to be, having drivers that are going to push them up the field. But yeah.
Okay. All right. Now looking forward, we're going to Melbourne. It's another weird. It is another weird weekend because the races are so short. I mean, qualifying is vitally important at this race as well because
there's no pit stops in these races, right? Like no mandatory ones.
No, there's no. I don't think there's pit stops, and it's not an easy place to pass either, really. So there's you definitely say if Walkinshaw and Tickford want to sort of get to challenge Triple Eight, they definitely need to, qualify better. And I don't really have I don't think Chaz will have a problem qualifying well there. He's pretty handy around there. But just in terms of, bouncing back, I think like Waters and Chaz, who we sort of take for granted are the two guys, other than Triple Eight and Dick Johnson Racing as in that like sort of power six. Definitely will need to the teams need to sort of roll out of the trucks as good as they can, because the same problem is going to be there as this week. They're not going to have that much time to practice, and they're going to need to be dialed in pretty quick.
One thing that they do have on their side is that both the car and the drivers have got good street track form. They've got good Albert Park form, and hopefully it's just a matter of them getting dialed in early. And the reality is, if they're there or thereabouts, I mean, I think we've seen it from both Chaz and Cam, they will wring an extra few tenths of performance out of the car. And hopefully for them, it's something that, or the weekend itself is something that can be, beneficial, because right now, if Van Gisbergen, he's got 4 races, that's a lot of points up for grabs. And if he's able to dominate again, then he sets himself up very well early in this championship, and it could look very similar to what it did last year. So there needs to be a reaction. And we're not talking about Dick Johnson Racing, but Di Pasquale also has to react to this as well. Like, he has to be able to try to peg some points back too. So all 3 of them really need to kind of show some resolve.
Yeah. Well, you're going to be there trackside, H. Are you looking forward to seeing them whiz around Albert Park?
I am actually.
Are you going to be there, going there every day?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I've already told the missus. Organise some shopping trips or something, because I'll be there from start to finish every day. So looking forward to seeing all of it, actually, because S5000 are going to be there. There's going to be so much good racing happening. So really looking forward to it.
Good stuff. Anything else you want to touch on for the supercars there?
No, I think we'll leave it there.
Yeah.
Obviously, we're going to be talking about supercars and Formula One in 10 days' time. So that's exciting.
Yeah.
But gents, again, thanks for your time. It's always good talking to you. I've got an hour and a half of audio in the can, which is always a good podcast. And, thanks everyone again for listening. So please keep following us on our socials. I mean, the socials have started to take off a little bit this year, H, which is good to see. So please like, subscribe, share, keep spreading the word.
Give us a rating on your podcast platform.
Yeah, please interact with us. Send us your questions as well. And hopefully over the next couple of days, we'll have some trackside footage to share with you as well from our head of
media.
Head of media. That's the one. All right, guys. Thanks for your time. Have a great night.
Thanks, mate.
Guys.
Have a good one.
See you, man. Take care.